It's Wednesday, my dudes. So it's Wednesday, bringing you that devotional. Unfortunately, we can't be together tonight, but we're bringing you the word tonight, and I hope you enjoy it. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. We were talking about the internet and how people get their information now. It used to be that before the internet came along, that people believed what their communities believed. They believed what everybody around them believed. It was possible to stay in kind of isolation, figuring out other information. You went to a library or something along those lines, but a lot of times people weren't exposed to other people's viewpoints. And then my generation came along. We have the internet, but we have to go out there and we have to look for things, right? We have to find what we're looking for. Now that information is unsolicited. You don't have to go looking for it anymore. It just pops up on TikTok on your For You page. Or wherever you may be, if it's Instagram or whatever. It used to be that you didn't encounter an agnostic's or an atheist's views just out in the wild. And for my generation, you had to go looking for it. Now that is in front of you 24/7. These different viewpoints, these different ideas, they're just coming out and bombarding you, and they're these little sound bites, these things that can happen in 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. So now more than ever, it's important that we read, we stay informed, we get into scripture. Moving into 2021, I was reading a statistic that the millennial generation was down 16% in church attendance, and even more so with Generation Z. So I was thinking about how we reach these teens, how we reach these people, because it breaks my heart to see that so many people are leaving the faith based off of these surface level understandings of what they believe. Because oftentimes they're bombarded with so many different ideas and so many different thoughts, and that's a good thing. But what that forces us to do is dive into the Word, dive into why we believe what we believe, and create a solid foundation for our faith. Because if we don't do that, if we don't create a solid foundation for our faith, we end up losing it. We end up walking away. That's why nearly 70 to 80% of teenagers lose their faith, or they walk away from their church their freshman year of college. So now more than ever is it important to develop an understanding of your faith. Create a faith that is your own. In Acts 17, Paul and Silas were going to Berea. In verse 10 it says, the brothers immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. And when they arrived, they went into the Jewish synagogue. Now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Many of them therefore believed, with not a few Greek women of high standing as well as men. Paul and Silas went to Berea, and they were teaching the word. They were spreading the word. They were teaching people what they had learned and about their faith. But the Bereans didn't take it at surface level. The Bereans didn't take just what Paul and Silas were saying. The Bereans went home after hearing what Paul and Silas had to say, and they tested what they said against the scripture to see if these things were so. I think this is so powerful. It shows that this particular passage paints the Bereans in a really positive light, showing that they were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They were blessed for examining the scriptures. They didn't take just what Paul and Silas were saying. They tested it against the scripture. Now we don't have the choice to do that. Now we must do that. The church has not done a great job in the past of teaching us and equipping us how to read the scripture for ourselves and to develop our faith for our own. But now we must. Now we're getting this information unsolicited. It's in our face 24/7, and we're forced to create a faith that is our own. We can no longer rely on the faith of our family and our community. And many will paint this in a negative light, saying that the internet is bad and globalization, social media, all of that stuff is bad. But honestly, it's a positive thing, because what it does is it forces us to read for ourselves and create a faith that is ours. It creates strong Christians, strong individuals for a strong community of believers. But if we don't do that for ourselves, then all we're going to have is a surface level understanding of our faith. And I'll tell you this, we can't judge the faith based off of that surface level understanding, and you can't stay with the faith on that surface level understanding. We're called to go deeper. We're called to grow. We're called to be Christians. It's a challenge that's tough. It's a challenge that's not easy. It's a challenge that will ultimately take us deeper and bring us closer to God. So often I've talked about a particular passage in the Bible. It's Deuteronomy 6:4. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength." And that's repeated in Luke 10, and that's repeated in Matthew for the Great Commandment. When Jesus is asked, what's the greatest commandment? Or what shall I do to get into heaven? This passage is brought up. Love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. And so I've talked about the circle. It's important that we develop our faith in the mind. And that's what I'm talking about here tonight, is that it's important to read, it's important to follow up, it's important to check what you are hearing against the scripture. It's important to check what you're hearing against truth. It's important to grow your faith. But not only is it important to grow your faith, but it's important to worship, it's important to pray. It's important to immerse yourself in that belief system. So I challenge you, moving into this new year, moving into 2021, I don't want to see people falling away from the faith like they have. I want to see people who are coming to honest answers about their faith. I want to see people who are owning their faith for themselves, because we're called to grow deeper, grow closer with God. Not only through what we check versus the scripture, but through our worship and through our prayer. And that creates more of a will, more of a desire to get closer to God. It creates this circular process that draws us in, that draws us deeper, that draws us closer. When we do this, when we draw closer through not only our checking of the scripture, reading in and diving in and parsing it out, growing as Christians, when we do this, we become better Christians. We win others to the faith. We grow and we become more like Him. So that's my challenge to you this year. As we move into the new year, I challenge you to pursue God, to pursue Him with everything that you have, not to be swayed by all of these 30-second to 1-minute videos you see popping up on social media, to really honestly take a deep look at what people are saying, because there are answers. It's okay to ask those questions because there are answers. The scripture offers the intellectual reasons for growing in your faith. So I challenge you, as we move into this new year, let's draw closer to God. Let's draw closer to Him through our intellect and our worship and our prayer. Let us have the desire to be closer to Him.